Hey everyone, wherever you are, I hope you're having a wonderful week so far. We heard the latest episode of the Inside Crypto Show, interviews and discussions with regular people just like yourselves. Today we are joined by Sam Harrison, CEO of Discreet Labs. Sam combines a legal background and over 10 years of experience in marketing and strategic business development. The Discreet Labs team, with Sam's leadership, pushes the boundaries of zero-knowledge technology, making privacy the standard for Web3 applications through the Findora blockchain. Before we get started, though, as usual, let's talk about Sam's background. And we had a wonderful chat just before the podcast today. So I know a little bit, but I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more. Sam, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I never know how to answer this question because I know everyone tends to answer this question with how I fell down the rabbit hole, how I got exposed to crypto and all that jazz, which I think is fairly interesting. But once you've heard one story, you've heard them all, right? That rabbit hole story tends to be consistent. So I'll just hit a handful of the key points. And this is me getting to brag about myself. So strap in, this is going to be a lot of fun. So let's see, college, right? I got a philosophy degree out of the University of Utah. It was great. I published as an undergrad researcher in philosophy, a phenomenal little piece of work that I called Immanuel Kant and the Destruction of Theocratic Governments. It was based in Immanuel Kant's writings on the metaphysics of morals, rather than his more well-known treatise on critique of pure reason. So that gets me started, right? So I'm beginning to think about ethics. I'm beginning to think that was my emphasis in philosophy, was ethical systems. So how do we motivate people to do stuff that is right? And more importantly, how many times have we failed in that in the history of mankind, right? And so I took that and I realized that my philosophy degree, I couldn't go into a company and say, pay me to tell you that you're doing something morally wrong. There's not a whole lot of jobs in that marketplace. So I went to law school, which gave up on the conquest of doing something right. But I went to law school. I studied corporate governance and intellectual property protection. And so this is all about how big organizations are able to align the incentives of the key leaders with the stakeholders in a company, right? That's what corporate governance is all about. And then intellectual property protection, you're talking copyrights, trademarks, patents, all that jazz. I graduated from law school at the height of the financial crisis, like the one that we just averted a couple of days ago before this recording. And as a result, basically the legal market for the corporate attorneys that I wanted to be was devastated. Like there just weren't any jobs available. So I got an MBA because why not? And that emphasis was in finance. And so now what you have, a little bit about my background, is you have somebody who studied motivations to do something right. You studied corporate governance, how to align incentives. You studied intellectual property and how you exchange it. And then you studied finance. So even before I finished schooling in 2012, I basically had almost every single tool set that you would need to run crypto. Except I cannot code worth a damn. You put a piece of code in front of me and I'm just like, is this like E.E. Cummings? What are we doing here? I'm very confused about the poetry that you just put on my screen. It's really bad. So I don't have any of that technical side, but I'm okay with that because as I came up in the blockchain space, I was there for Tezos being turned on mainnet. I've been with 4 or 5 different crypto companies. I've been through 3 different bear markets and bull runs. And what has been exciting about it is as I've been in the business, I have seen and participated in all of the new innovations, which has been really cool. And I've seen them from the business side, right? It's not just the, hey, what can we do with these cool zero knowledge proofs? Why does somebody care what we can do with the zero knowledge proofs? And so that is a bit about my background, about my comeuppance, or what I will eventually get as a comeuppance. But yeah, if you have any questions, if you want me to delve into any more specifics, more than happy to.
It's definitely a unique story, and I don't think I've heard that. I think one of the things that really popped out to me, and I mean, it'll play to a particular demographic of our listeners, is you studied a lot. And like most people, especially this side of the world, right? Kids go to school 6 days a week. So like when they finish university, they don't really want to study more. But like, what made you do 3 degrees?
I love education. One of my safe places is inside Barnes & Noble, the bookstore. My first job was at a bookstore that doesn't exist anymore called Borders, like my first place that I paid taxes.
Borders.
Oh man, it was so great. It was so great. And so I've always been somebody that is fascinated with knowledge and curiosity and acquiring that knowledge and curiosity. And Also from a strategic mindset, I understood that schooling in many ways is about putting certain tools in a toolbox that then you can pull out and use when you're working for a company and get paid for it. And like I alluded to with my philosophy degree, after my bachelor's, I realized there really weren't a whole lot of people where I could use this tool set. So I wanted to get something better. I wanted to get something stronger. And I took my philosophy training, transitioned that into a law degree, which is fairly common and was exciting and very fun. And then I realized that even then, being able to speak just to the law, like I could speak to the law and whether or not it's ethical, which is almost the same thing in a lot of people's minds. It's not, but a lot of people think it is. And so that meant that I needed to get something more, right? I was so specific. I needed to broaden it out a little bit. And so that's why I got my MBA. And that gave me finance tools, marketing tools, entrepreneurship management. One of the most interesting case studies I ever read had to do with queuing theory, which is like how people line up at a store. Do you have one line for everybody, or do you have 10 lines for everybody and 10 cashiers? What is the most effective way to get that through? And there is a science, like there is a case study on that. And that's, to me, fascinating. I love the idea of these little tiny process improvements that we can make that improve things exponentially.
Very cool. And I guess a follow-up on that question is, with this sort of like broad base of knowledge, you were just promoted to the CEO of Discreet Labs. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And that explains how super busy you are. But I would say like you have a lot of CEOs in not just crypto, but broadly speaking around the world. They have a little bit of an academic background, but a lot of experience or a lot of different sorts of education. How has all this knowledge, how does it affect your day-to-day role as a CEO?
That's a good question. I think the first answer may be a little unique to the United States, which is it created a lot of ambition so I could pay off my student loans. Like I had to get to a certain level of compensation. So all of those hundreds of thousands of dollars I spent on my graduate degrees, I could service those loans and be okay. But in a more real sense, I really think that there's a method to the madness, right? And being able to have studied all of these different blocks. When I encounter problems in business, when I encounter problems in sales or in marketing or even in technology and process, I understand what boxes I need to put these in. More important than that, I also know, and this is one of the big learnings you come out of business school with, just because you tripped and fell one time does not mean that you're a failure, right? So just because one particular experiment that you might do to reach out and get more people to use, for example, blockchain technology, like that didn't do a good job, that's okay. You can do more experiences. You can iterate. You can figure out what it is that you did wrong so that you can make it all the way to that final mile. You can make it all the way to that finish line. And so if anything, aside from being able to categorize and think about things in a very tactical way, the ability to say, I haven't failed because I'm not done yet, I think is really important.
I love that. You are just a fountain of pearls of wisdom there, Sam. That is just awesome. Okay, let's dive into the questions. But before we do, I should say, as a reminder, anything you or I say does not constitute financial or legal advice. Our opinions are our own and not to be connected with our respective organizations. And yeah, Sam, like you are a big privacy person. That is what I was told. And it is very important. A bit famous in my family between my two brothers who are somewhat private people. I'm very open because I used to be a teacher as well. And one of the things here in Asia, you have to be extremely available, extremely open. So parents are like, this is the person who I'm entrusting my kids to. So I've just always been like that. Like all my information, photos, Facebook settings are horribly public. But yeah, tell us, like, I'm very familiar with Discreet Labs. I've been in crypto since 2017. I love the name, not to mention a lot of the stuff you guys do. There's also Findora as well. I talked to a few of our listeners before you were coming on the show. I'm like, hey, and they were like familiar with Discreet Labs, but maybe not so familiar with Findora. Maybe you can talk about both and so in.
Sure. So I'll approach this from the perspective, okay, what is Findora and how does Discreet Labs play into it? We'll have to follow up on the privacy piece of this because this is something that Findora enables, but we can talk about that in just a second. So basically, Findora is an EVM compatible blockchain. We have a unique architectural structure that we have a second layer of a distributed or decentralized ledger underneath our EVM chain, right? So we have a UTXO chain as well. And UTXO is this style of chain of account settling that something like Bitcoin uses instead of an EVM. Now, the reason why we have this is that the EVM chain has some restrictions to remain, compatible with all the other Ethereum virtual machines. There's some things we can't do with it, but we can do with UTXO. And that's what empowers our privacy solution. So we can talk about that in just a sec. So the quick takeaway is anything that you can deploy on Ethereum or any of the other EVM chains, you can deploy on us. Like we have all the bells and whistles that you would need, graph, oracles, verifiable random functions, all of that stuff. But then what it allows, this dual chain architecture allows us to add certain features on top, like what we are calling masking, or triple masking is the way that we refer to it. And this is how we start getting into the privacy. Triple masking allows you to select yourself, not through Findora, not through Chase, not through Circle or Coinbase. You yourself in your wallet can select, I want to mask my wallet address, I want to mask my asset type, and I'm going to mask my asset amount. So I'm covering these attributes of the transaction, and then I'm going to send it, right? Now, normally when you talk about privacy, a lot of the times in the space, we talk about Tornado Cash. And that really is a tumbler or a mixer where they break your transaction into hundreds of thousands of transactions, mix it with hundreds or thousands of other transactions, and kick it out the other side. And there's no way to unwind that process. It's kind of like taking a chicken, turning it into a chicken nugget, and then trying to turn it back into a chicken. Like technically it's still chicken. It's just, it's not a chicken. Unless you're at McDonald's. No. And so we're able to turn the chicken nugget back into a chicken because we have then an additional technology on top of this masking called a view key, which allows the individual to say, I am going to unmask these pieces of information for this specific person or entity for this specific amount of time or unlimited, right? I can set all those variables. And what that allows you as the individual to do is be compliant. And that's a big deal. Like I saw the mouth go, oh, wait, compliance in blockchain? Are you kidding? This is insane. No, it's totally, we can be compliant, which means number one, institutions can use us. Number two, if I need to, like my taxes are going to be so much easier this year because I'll be able to send my view key and my ledger over to my accountant and he's going to be able to pull all that different stuff and just line it up really quickly, and I'll be totally compliant. I don't have to hunt for anything and try and figure out X, Y, and Z. In doing that, I'm able to control. I don't want to talk about hiding information. I want to talk about controlling the information that I share with the wider public. And that's how we can get into a little bit more detail about what privacy is. But I'm going to pause there because I'm bordering on the Professor Sam role, which after all those degrees, you could understand why I fall back sometimes into Professor Sam.
I've got to say, a bunch of people who listen to this podcast regularly would know some people, like, they do not have time control, and you have impressive time control because I have some timers over here I've programmed for different questions, and it's just like you are nailing every single segment. But yeah, let me get back on track. So you just answered some of my questions. I was going to talk about KYC and AML and with the idea of unmasking. That is just awesome. It just, because I saw something about the Aztec protocol were shutting down in the States, and they were like, yeah, with the way the States is moving forward on crypto legislation, looks like we can operate. But with, Findora, I guess you would be compliant with any potential legislation the American government might come up with, which is awesome. I guess my second question, right, goes into what I've said before, is like, you are EVM compatible, which opens up a ton of opportunities. How are you incentivizing devs or people to build on Findora? Who are your partners? How are you saying, hey, come build some stuff on? How are you attracting people to start using Findora? Because like I said, I was aware of Discreet Labs for a while, but I was not aware of Findora. I'm like, how can if somebody listens to this podcast today, they're like, man, Sam is an awesome speaker. Findora sounds interesting. Where would you want people to take their first step into the blockchain, into Discreet Labs and what you're doing?
That's an excellent question. Obviously, the best first portal for anybody when they talk about a blockchain is their website, so findora.org. The documents, we just finished a revamp of the docs with our Vice President of Developer Relations. And so the docs are in great shape. So you can go, you can take a look at our docs, I think that URL is findora.org/docs. I'd have to double check that. But so we have the docs, and then of course we have the GitHub repo. Now we're huge believers in open source software. And so I'm trying to get our code and our project in front of as many open source developers out there as possible. We partner with people such as ETH Denver. We just got back from ETH Denver, which was great. They had 25,000 people show up, about 15,000 people on the ground, which is a third. It's like a 30% increase over, no, even more than 30%. My math, it's long. It's at the end of the day for me. One of the things I learned with my finance degree is I never do math in my head. I always do it in a calculator, even if it's simple, so I don't make a mistake that I have to find later. But that's neither here nor there. But the point is, like, we partner with ETH Denver to participate in that hackathon. We partner with organizations like ETH Global, and they have multiple hackathons, both virtual and in person, throughout the year, all around the globe. And so we'll be attending several of those. We have partners such as Encode Club and Gitcoin. And throughout this year, we'll be spinning up hackathons that you can do with both of those. There is a conversation with Dora Hacks, which is more predominantly the Asian hackathon vendor, but we haven't quite closed that one yet. It's just starting. So all of those different areas, you can find Findora there. But to further incentivize, we have a $100 million ecosystem grant program. Wow. But this grant program, this $100 million, we're actually being very safe and secure and having good stewardship over it, because I've been in situations and I've been part of organizations that looked at their grant program as a vanity exercise, could be the best way to describe it. Hey, let's talk about how much we have in our bank and how much we're giving out. To their credit, they were able to create some significant noise. They were able to get some significant projects and partners. But here at Findora, it's not necessarily about the fact that, oh, look, we have $100 million. It's the fact that if you want to come and build on Findora, we have a grant that could help you make it easier. We're not your venture capitalist. We are not your bank. We are not the people that's going to fund in perpetuity the development of your application. But if you need to make it just a little bit easier, or if you're trying to get to an MVP and you just need a little bit of scratch to get to your minimally viable product, that's a place where we can help, as long as it aligns with our objectives as well. So those are a couple different ways. Hackathons, grant program. Ooh, my chief business officer would kill me if I didn't talk about this. We have a university partnership program. And so we are partnering with universities, worldwide universities, with basically their computer science labs. We help those local clubs and those local groups set up their own validator and learn what that's like. And then I'll show up occasionally with pizza and beer, chat with all the students, and talk about the future is bankless. And hopefully that encourages it as well. So those are 4 prongs of our approach to getting developers to build on us.
Nice. What about regular people? What are people saying? Okay, I'm doing some transactions on Uniswap and I want to try do some swaps on Findora. What are the options for regular people to start using Findora?
So because I am in the States, I do have to be careful about how I discuss this particular thing.
Of course.
So let me preface this and make a little disclosure. I'm not advocating buying any sort of instrument that could or could not pass or not pass the Howey test about being an investment contract in the United States as judged by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Do you think I covered my bases?
I think you covered it pretty well.
I'm really tired of doing that. My lawyers say this is what I got to do all the time. The takeaway is we're on several exchanges, right? One of the most popular ones is KuCoin. So you can definitely get your hands. You can go explore and see what you can find on KuCoin. And then, of course, there are a variety of swaps out there that are helpful. But I have to actually pause and not talk about a couple of things that are under embargo right now. So watch this space. There's a lot of really interesting things coming over the course of the next month or 2 months. That'll be very cool, but I can't talk about them right now.
No worries. Is there like a particular place that people should be watching? Should it be Twitter? Should it be Telegram? Should it be YouTube? What's the best place for people to keep up to date?
Twitter and the website, right? Going to twitter.com/Findora, and all of those announcements will be posted there. That's probably the best. Crypto Twitter is always the fastest. Then the website, you can find links to our Telegram and our Discord. We're actually much more active over on Discord than we are in Telegram. We've found that it's actually easier to moderate and do special campaigns and prizes and stuff like that on Discord than it is to do that same sort of stuff over on Telegram.
I had a thought because I'm releasing a podcast today, and I remember the particular guest, he termed Ethereum the gold standard in terms of blockchains. And I was wondering, where or how do you see yourself positioning Findora in terms of blockchains, right? Are you the gold, the platinum, or are you the business chain that's going to facilitate stuff between banks? Or like, in your mind, what should Findora be used for ideally?
That's an excellent question. I would actually quibble with the person that said Ethereum is the gold standard in blockchain. I would say Ethereum is the Model T of blockchain.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
it has all the pieces of an internal combustion automobile, but it's really slow. It's really rickety. It does get you from point A to point B, but it's not quite ready for the billion plus cars on the streets that they have today. So from my perspective, if I were to look at what Findora is in comparison to a Model T Ethereum, I would say that we are a model. What is it? Is it the Model 3 that's the cheap version of the Tesla? Like the cheap version of the Tesla with tinted windows.
Oh, okay.
That's Findora.
Why would you phrase it like that?
So the Model 3, because it's very advanced, right? The battery technology, all that very different stuff is very advanced. The team behind it is very innovative. Like, we're really looking to do things better, faster, stronger. It's proof of stake. Ethereum is now proof of stake, so we've moved away from the worries about the electrical consumption of proof of work. So that's good. But we're also a proof of stake network, which is nice. And then I like the tinted windows. The technology at Tesla doesn't exist yet, but I would love the day for I can choose to push a button and the windows tint. And then I push a button and the windows untint, because it's that privacy aspect. And so that's what I view as being good for Findora. Anybody and their dog. Okay, Tesla's a little bit more expensive than your standard Toyota Camry, $20,000 or so more expensive here in the States. So it's a step above. So maybe that part of the analogy doesn't work, but it is very high quality, moves very fast. You can see them. I live in Palo Alto, California. I see Teslas everywhere, right? You can see it everywhere, but you also have the option to be private. And those couple of things, I think, come together to show how we compare. Do you need me to go back and try and find a metal alloy that fits the gold standard approach?
No, I think even here, I think we got Teslas maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, so people are familiar with it. Sam, we were supposed to touch on privacy, but let's go back to the privacy idea. And since you did bring it up a few times, why is privacy so essential? Why, you mentioned the Tornado Cash example, and you mentioned masking and unmasking, I think, which is really awesome. Why should people listening to this care about privacy in blockchain in their life in general?
I think it's all about whether or not you care about your relationships. And I'm just going to stop there and see if that sparks anything. No, so I've been thinking about privacy a lot. I started engaging with privacy as an undergrad, reading various different philosophy papers and treaties and stuff like that. And one of the things that I found in law school was that the question of expectation of privacy would probably be our generation's great moral fight. You know, in the United States, our parents' fight really had to do with civil rights and maybe the right to have an abortion in the States. Our grandparents' fight were the world wars. Our great grandparents may have been like slavery and the Civil War here in the States. Our fight is about whether or not we have control over who we form relationships with, because that's what privacy allows you to do. It boils down to data and information. When I'm having this conversation with you, we are exchanging data in the open, and we're able to form a relationship like this. Now, if we were at a date and there was a nice little flickering candle between us at a candlelit dinner, I would be exchanging much different information with you, because that would be the sort of relationship I want to create, is one that's more intimate, more loving, more of a relationship oriented. I would talk more about my feelings. When I exchange information and data with the government, I'm creating a certain relationship there. Now, over the course of the last 20, 30 years or so, more and more companies have decided to say, okay, if you put this piece of data online, I can take it and I can give it to anybody else I want. Like, you have no control over this data. So, for example, I'll put on my really old Facebook page that I really like that old show, West Wing. It's a great Aaron Sorkin show about politics. It was really big from 99 to 2005 or something. So for those members of your audience who have no idea what years those are because they're so young, wow, you guys are young. So I say that I like West Wing. Now, what Facebook is going to do is they're going to take that piece of data and they're going to sell it to an advertiser, so that advertiser can sell me, let's say it's Aaron Sorkin's earlier piece of work, something called Sports Night, right? So I'll get an advertisement to buy a Sports Night DVD because we're playing 2005 at this point. DVDs were hot. I don't want that relationship with the advertiser. I don't want Sports Night. I don't want that to show up on my thing. I don't have any control of that, though, because Facebook took my data, shared it with an advertiser, and created a relationship on my behalf that I have no control over. And that is why privacy is important. Now, we can ratchet this up in many different ways to see why there's a pending apocalypse coming or is already here about invasions of our privacy, or about how no one expects privacy anymore and why that's a problem. But really at its core, I really think it's important to rephrase privacy, not in the idea that I'm hiding something. I'm not. It's about control. It's about the fact that I get to control what relationships I enter into.
Okay, then I have a question. There are lots of different privacy solutions, privacy platforms, ideas of privacy, but I think maybe even similar to the blockchain space, right, where we have different blockchains, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, so many, Findora, of course. And are we ever going to get to a state where there's a privacy solution that scales up enough to cover 25% of the world?
That's a good question. And the answer is, by myself, even if I had all the money in the world to run Findora, the answer would be no, because it's not about a single individual or a single company grabbing everybody by the horns and forcing them into privacy. This is something that has to come from the bottom up. This is really about creating the expectation of privacy. That if I log in to the social media network of the future, and it doesn't start by saying, these are the pieces of information that we have the ability to share with advertisers, please click on which ones you decide to share. If it doesn't start there, we've already lost the fight, because no one's going to go back and dig through their privacy settings and figure that out. But if it starts by saying, hey, A, B, and C we share, X, Y, and Z we share, 1, 2, and 3 we do not share, that's vital. Now, the other piece I think is really important, because it is a bottom up. We do have the technology now to do this. Like, the technology exists. It's called blockchain. Blockchain gives us the ability to, in very small, granular ways, control our digital assets, which is data, right? Right now, we talk a lot about tokens being transferred back and forth. NFTs are digital assets. I can create a variety of skins on Fortnite, and those are digital assets that I could own on a blockchain. So it's about ownership of digital assets. It's also about decentralization. Like, no one can stop blockchain from happening. That's one of the things that I'm just so surprised about some of the recent conversations here in the United States about their seeming animosity towards blockchain. You can't stop it. It's not going away. This is decentralized for a reason. Get out of the way and get on board. Sorry, a little frustrated today, but that's neither here nor there. So the technology exists both for ownership of digital assets, decentralization all the way at the ground level that nobody can stop. And now with zero knowledge proofs, you have the ability to prove that you own or are something without actually showing that thing that you are or that thing that you own to somebody else. So that's privacy right there. Those are our 3 building blocks to being able to have a product that gives you your privacy back.
I was just thinking, I'm like, we did not explain zero knowledge proofs that you did in a nice, simple sentence. This podcast is going to be gold for YouTube shorts and TikTok and stuff with all these like little short segments.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Sam, let's take a step back and look at the macro situation. The last 6 to 12 months, maybe 18 months for some companies have been very difficult. And how are things at Discreet Labs? How are things with you personally moving forward? Some people have lost confidence in crypto. In a sense, that's expected given everything that's happened. How are you feeling about the ecosystem, about crypto, about things moving forward into 2023?
Good, really positive, right? So especially from the crypto side, especially from the ground level up. Every single time I get worried about the future or worried about what's going to happen in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, it never has to do with the business side of crypto. It almost always has to do with somebody, usually in some place like Washington, D.C., talking out of their backside. I don't know how adult our conversation is, just talking out of nowhere. And that roils both the financial markets, it roils the crypto markets, it can roil just employment across the board. It's the stupid steps that they take that I'm more worried about than the fact that the business and the technology is progressing. I've been in crypto long enough that I know that there are bulls and I know that there are bear runs, right? You have a bull run and a bear run, and it's a cycle. That sucks, but the trend line throughout all of that is just up and to the right, right? More people are adopting it, more people are using it. That's excellent. Are we ever going to get back to the day where people could be made millionaires in a week? Probably not. Hopefully not. That's a little too hot for my blood. But I think that we're going to keep moving forward, period.
So let's jump back on the Findora Discreet Labs bandwagon.
Sure.
So you've taken over the reins this year, and you do mention that there is an embargo for certain things. And I always like to ask this question because I know a certain percentage of our audience was like, okay, we know what they are, but we will also like, people like to get excited about what's coming. And I was wondering if you could share a general idea on both fronts, like what's coming for Findora and Discreet Labs over the next 6 to 12 months. Again, generally speaking, and you can speak about as much or as little as you want.
Okay, let's see if I can do this without getting in trouble around the various different embargoes. Okay, so first off, is Findora is actually a very young chain. We've been around, like Discreet Labs and Findora has been around in operation for about 2 years or so, but it's only been in the last 6-12 months that we've really started pushing on the business partnerships and the marketing side. Before then, we were just building, right? We are solving problems with ZK proofs. We are solving interactions between our EVM chain and our UTXO chain. Like all of those things that we needed to have a functioning platform, we solved from an engineering standpoint. And so some of the stuff that you will see over the course of the next several months is release after release of these products that we've been building, or these tool sets, more appropriately, that we've been building. You'll see those released. We also do kind of test flights of certain implementations. Like we have a project that's called FNS. It's a Findora naming service. It has some similarities to ENS, but it's not. It's actually very different. It is much better, much stronger than ENS for a couple of reasons that I can get into if you're interested. But the takeaway is we just wanted to build a naming service that could utilize our privacy solutions and to see what would happen with it. We don't know whether or not we're going to keep running this as our own business concern or if we're going to spin it off to somebody else, because that's not what our core competency is, right? Our core competency is building really cool stuff. Whether or not operational and adoption, we want to get really good at that sort of stuff because that's what's coming in the next year. But the tech stack as it exists, or the technical team as it exists, that's what they're great at, building cool stuff. So we'll see that. We'll also see more DEXs. We'll see more bridges. We'll see more avenues from existing crypto ecosystems into the Findora ecosystem, more routes that they can take. So that's really impressive. So keep watching for that, because you'll see stuff like fiat on-ramps, FRA, the token being supported in multiple wallets. We just launched EVM staking, I think. I'm a little kerfluffled just because of ETH Denver. Sometimes I miss the announcement when I'm at a conference and then I don't catch it after the fact. But you should be able to stake on the EVM chain. We are working on integrations with MetaMask. We're working with a variety of new exchange partners. Like all of that stuff is coming. So be excited. I'm trying to think of anything that like I could actually talk to and specifically say this name, that thing, this day.
You covered a lot. I think a lot of what you said is exciting, and it shows, I think, why a lot of people like me to ask this question is because they want to see this is the effort, this is the commitment of X organization behind this blockchain or this project. And I think you've mentioned a ton, and I think that answers the question sufficiently, in my view. Anyway.
Let me put a point on two things. Number one goes to this idea of, okay, how are we reaching out to developers? Right before ETH Denver, we released something called the Privacy Routing SDK. So this is a full set of documents, of libraries. It's a full software development kit that'll help an open source developer add privacy to their application, however they want to do it. So that's one thing that was just announced. The next thing is a productized version of triple masking for users and triple masking for developers. So two slightly different things. This is for the users, as this is going to be deployed, it can be integrated into the wallets that you use, right? So our wallet, of course, we have a desktop, a mobile wallet on Android and iOS. So some of those aspects are already built in there, but other wallets are going to be able to include this triple masking in their wallets, right? And then furthermore, the developers could use the triple masking for developers to introduce privacy or masking features into their dApps as well. And there can be some really cool applications of that in something like games. There is a really huge desire to make blockchain games fun. And honestly, they're not. And I think part of the reason is because there's no surprise in them. You pretty much know what you're going to farm, and you pretty much have a reasonable expectation of a certain amount of return as long as you're playing the game, right? Like, okay, you don't have a ton of surprise. And so if we can introduce surprise through hiding something, masking it, and then unmasking it in game, you can create games that are actually much, much, much more fun. And so that's also coming, and that's coming pretty soon as well.
That's really cool. Sam, I do want to touch on two more things before we end up today's show. Maybe just one is I thought was really cool. Not to mention, you're just like, you're an awesome speaker. That's why I really want to talk about this is you have a podcast. I just wanted to give you a chance to talk to our listeners about the podcast.
Yeah. Happy. Thank you. Thank you. It's one of the things I love about the podcast community is this happens all of the time. One of my favorite podcasts I ever listened to is this podcast called ꕬologies by this podcaster called Ali Ward is her name. And she's on a bunch of different shows and stuff, and she's great. But the way I found out about it was I was listening to The Nerdist with Chris Hardwick, which is a comedy podcast.
Yes.
And so this is how the podcast industry works. And it's one of the things that I love to see and I want to see more of in the blockchain space, right? I would love to show up to a Near event and learn about a new project that has nothing to do with Near that just happens to be there at the same time. If that does happen, I just want to see it more because it's very prominent in podcasting. So my podcast is called the Proof of Privacy Podcast. Right now, we are available on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just a few minutes ago, before we started recording this, I found out that we're not yet on Google Podcasts. So that will be fixed by, I don't know, like a half an hour. I just got to route the RSS feed over. The whole purpose of the Proof of Privacy podcast is to have interesting conversations with people in the space and not in the space, but maybe blockchain adjacent. Talk about what they're working on, talk about what the impact is, and talk about how privacy matters to them. Some people have a very structured idea about how they think privacy should work. Some people haven't really thought about it, but in the course of the conversation, they realize that it can be very applicable to what they're doing. These interviews have been terrific. I had like Matthew Gould, the CEO and founder of Unstoppable Domains, was one of my first interviews. He was great. It was so much fun talking with him. One of my old colleagues and a good friend of mine, Devin Marty and DJ Cacao, who is, I guess, a big DJ out of Southeast Asia, they have a project called Sound, and that was another great interview that's also dropped because they're doing some amazing things with NFTs and music discovery and linking it to hardware. Like your private keys are stored in your earphone, which is cool. And so they're doing some really cool stuff like with that. And so all of these conversations revolve around applying blockchain technology, owning your digital assets. And then we move in that space to talking about how you can control it, which is privacy. So it's very cool. I encourage everyone to look at it, check it out, like it, subscribe it, comment on it. Let's break these algorithms, making sure that everyone can discover both proof of privacy and inside crypto.
Thank you, Sam. Are you a weekly podcast, a monthly, or bi-weekly?
I'm a weekly podcast, which is a lot for as a podcaster, you know. So I have something on the order of about 5 more banked interviews, which means I got to start banking some more. So I have probably about a good month and a half left with my dry powder. So I'm constantly looking for more interesting people to interview.
Nice. That's just incredible. Like you're a CEO and you're running a weekly podcast. I don't know how you find the time.
I don't sleep anymore.
All right, Sam, it's probably past dinner time for me. I usually eat an early dinner here in Taiwan, but I don't want to keep you too long. Last thing is just anything you want to mention that you were told you should mention that you want to plug before we end off today's podcast. You supplied a bunch of links. I'm going to make sure to put the podcast link as well. Last words. You've already shared so much wisdom, but yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm actually going to take this moment not to talk about anything that I'm working on, but to give a virtual hug to a lot of people out there that are having a rough time. So we're recording this on, is it Tuesday today? On a Tuesday, just a few days after Silvergate, Silicon Valley Bank, and Signature Bank all folded shop. We're all brought into receivership by the US government. And also we had USDC was depegged and then repegged. And so there's a significant amount of turmoil happening right now. A lot of people are going to be very worried right now about their jobs. A lot of startups that are looking for funding are suddenly encountering really hard times trying to find funding. this is tough. So as in crypto, we look around and we realize that this is part of the transition from the banked world to the unbanked world. We need to be very cognizant of everybody around us who has to go through the pain of this transition. We know that the outcome will be very good, but the pain sucks. So I just want to encourage all of your listeners. I want to encourage anyone who is paying attention to the sound of my voice that there's going to be a lot of people around you who may be fighting a battle or fighting a fight that you know nothing about. And I just want to encourage you all to give everybody an extra little bit of patience, an extra breath, an extra couple of seconds, and just be there for your friends and your family. Like it's important. It's a good time to have that be part of what crypto is known for.
I totally agree. And that is an excellent way and an excellent note to end off today's podcast. Sam, thank you so much for your time, especially after you've had such a hectic schedule. And like you said, you're not sleeping anymore. So I appreciate that taking away from your non-sleeping time. An awesome podcast. And I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully we catch up maybe in about September, October this year and see how things are going with Findora. How's the podcast going? A lot of things to catch up on. And we will hopefully talk to you then.
I would love to. Anytime you can reach out either directly or however you'd like to. And I'd love to be able to be back on Inside Crypto some other time. I think you have a great audience. I think what you guys are working on is fantastic. And any recommendations or any advice from a professional podcaster to a newbie like myself is always welcome.
My pleasure. I have way too many tips in my head. And if you do need them, I'm more than happy to share them. You have a good evening and then we'll chat later.
Thank you so much.